Hey guys, we're back again. We have another interview today. We have our, I believe, I want to say fourth guest. We have a man with hands of stone, with chin of granite. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Sam, Hands of Stone Stout. Let's welcome him. All right, like we said, guys, we have Sam Stout here. Sam, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Hey man, look at the locks on you. I mean, I'm complaining about my hair not getting a haircut, but look at you. I've never seen Sam Stout. You look like Elias Theodorou. Oh my God.
It was always kind of on my bucket list to grow my hair real long, and I didn't really want to do it during fights. So this is quarantine. What better time to do it?
I feel like you would have been like Uriah Faber famous if you grew your hair out during that time.
Coulda, woulda, shoulda.
Definitely. But I mean, during COVID, I mean, what have you been doing? I know, so you opened the gym. Have you guys been open at all during it, or?
Well, we had a period there where we were allowed to open and be in like orange and red.
Right.
But it's been tough, man. It's been tough as a small business owner, right? We've been doing what we can. We've been putting out as much online content as possible. We've been trying to adhere to all the rules, but it's so hard to run a full contact fight gym without any contact. So it's been a very difficult year for the gym, but we have such a loyal member base that they've really kind of supported us through it. A lot of them are still paying memberships, even
nice.
when we're completely shut down, and we've just offered to credit it back to them. And some of them have even said, like, don't worry about it.
Oh, that's awesome.
They all want to, everyone wants to make sure they have a place to come back to when this is all over, right?
No, that's awesome, because like personally, like I just started training at Bazooka. I know you know Joe, and they just put everything on hold. So the fact that people are actually like still, that's just amazing for you guys.
Well, we've been a little less tight with the restrictions in London than Toronto and Scarborough. Less dense population, I think, is we haven't had the same numbers as Toronto, but it's still been very difficult. Hopefully we're open again and Joe's open again soon. I know it's been tough on him, and he's been bouncing around, cornering fights, calling fights, training guys. I know he's been pretty stressed about it.
No, definitely.
It can't be the same as what it used to be. Just preparing for anything. I'm sure you've seen with your fighters going over. Like you were in Fight Island recently, correct?
I was on Fight Island with Joe, actually. We went and cornered Malcolm Gordon. Wasn't a successful trip for him, but it's such a strange time. And, I've talked to a couple other guys like, James Krause, and he was saying they're pretty much business as usual there. So it really puts a strain on Canadian fighters and fighters that are in regions where they have these lockdowns, because Malcolm didn't really have any training partners for that fight. He had one or two guys. He wasn't able to put in a full camp. They offered him another fight, and I think that was one of the factors. It's like will be his third chance, probably his last chance to get a win. And sorry about I don't know if you guys can hear my
It's
dog.
All good.
I usually take him for a walk around this time. He's a little bit spoiled, this pandemic dog. We got him during the pandemic, so he's just used to having constant attention and us being at his beck and call. Anyways, yeah, Malcolm's, he's probably got one more shot. They offered him a fight, but, he just didn't feel like it was pretty short notice, only 5 weeks. It was for the card last weekend, actually. And, if it's such a challenge for guys, like no training partners. If you are working out with training partners, you're doing it illegally, basically.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's really strange.
Yeah, no, and talking about Malcolm too, like in my short time at Bazooka, I've seen guys 30 pounds heavier than him, and he's grappling with them and he's dominating them. So what do you think has been the reason that like he struggled so far? Is it just because those restrictions, do you think?
I think those definitely play a big part in it. And I think it's just himself getting himself in the right mind state. The hardest thing for any fighter is being able to mentally perform, or, mentally be there so you can physically perform on the big day. I think Malcolm still hasn't had a chance to show what he's really capable of in the octagon. He says it wasn't nerves and whatever, but I know him pretty well. I was in his corner in his first amateur fight. I've known him for his whole career, and I really know he's capable of a lot more. And he just needs the right opportunity to let everyone see that. Like if you watch his fights in TKO, some of his title fights, he's gone up against tough guys and dominated. And these 2 fights, he's barely got out of the gate and just kind of, it wasn't there.
Well, like you mentioned, he definitely had a disadvantage for not having being able to do a full camp compared to people in the States, people other places in the world. Do you think
100%, man? I'm watching these guys, other coaches that I know, and watching their Instagrams, and they got a full room. It's just, if you got 1 or 2 guys that are coming in and you're kind of doing black ops, sneaking in the back door of your gym, it's just not, it's not gonna give you the same results. That's just it's
almost like not competitive. They have a competitive advantage over what the situation we're in.
Yeah, 100%. And this is a sport that's just, it's fractured. Like it's the separation between a win and a loss sometimes is this tiny little percentage. And, so when you're working, at a disadvantage from the gate or out of the gate, it's really tough. And it's tough on, you might be able to get physically in the same shape, but you're mentally, might not be there. And that's, I think, the case with Malcolm.
And with that being said, would you have thought it would have been a good idea, or maybe potentially a good idea moving forward, if the UFC put together like a quarantine fight zone in Canada where people can train at camps?
That would be great, but that requires them spending money that they're, I don't see them doing it. The UFC is a business, and if they don't see an investment like that coming back as a return to them, they'll just go to the next country and get fighters from there. I'm very proud to have been a part of the UFC, but they're a business, and that's what always comes first to them, and no matter what they say.
Yeah, and kind of on that note as well, I guess questions that we were going to ask later, but we could stay on with that topic. You've been I've seen pictures of you recently with Dana White, but you've also been outspoken about them. Do you view Dana more as a friend or as a business associate?
I like to think of him as a friend in some ways, but when it comes down to it, he's looking out. He's running a business, and I appreciate being I still think the guy's amazing, what he's done with the sport. I just think he's a little cutthroat sometimes. I think, I respect Dana White very much, but you're seeing stuff like, he's pretty cold-blooded when it comes down to it. You see guys Spencer Fisher. I don't know if you read what's going on with him, and the guy's got no help. He's Dana's a capitalist through and through. He's going to be looking at the bottom line before he looks at anything else.
Yeah, and with that, do you think he does enough for fighters directly, or do you think it's more like backdoor, or does he actually have the power to impact these decisions and to make these things happen that we know that the UFC should be?
Oh, 100% he has the power to do it. We all know that Dana White wants something done, he gets it done. I don't think it's as much of a priority as it should be. They make you feel like this big family when you get in, when you first sign with them. And I know for me, it was, everyone in the room was, treats you with this, outpouring of what can we do for you? What can, they're really there for you when you can do something for them. I don't think they're, they've proven that they're not there for you when you don't have anything to offer them anymore.
And even with you saying that, didn't you get, I think you said 4,000 for your first fight? What can you even do with 4,000 when you're trying to make a living?
Yeah. And that's on a win. That's on a win. Times the money's gone up, thank God, for the first time fighters. I think they're starting out at 10 and 10 now. So that's a little more respectable. You come out, you can win 20 grand on your first win. But that's before expenses, before taxes, before all those things. So, it's really not a lot of money. You're making blue collar money fighting in the UFC, and you're doing permanent damage to yourself. It's, I went through a lot of wars. I feel the effects. I retired at 30 because, I was starting to see signs of, CTE and concussion damage. And, I'm not shy about saying that. I mean, I don't want to get blackballed by the UFC, and I'm not sorry. But I really think there needs to be more in place for the fighters to protect them and to take care of them into their retirement years, and not, that when the door closes, when you're leaving, it's like, don't let the doorknob hit you on the way out. It's pretty cutthroat. I think there needs to be some major changes in terms of, post-fight career care, like for guys like Spencer. Luckily we're in Canada, but I take medication because I was starting to see signs of major depression and, anger issues and these things that maybe were just frustration with the transition with my life, but it's hard not to think that they have something to do with taking all those punches to the head.
Well, and when you look back, you're still right up there, and for the lightweight division as most strikes landed, which means likely the most strikes landed on you as well.
Yeah. If you watch my fights, they were usually pretty close. So
you had a chin of steel.
I mean, that's the realization of that is the reason I retired. I'm not. It's if I could, if there was no CTE, if there was no concussions, I'd still be fighting today. But for the amount of money that guys are making in there, and I was lucky. I mean, I didn't have the greatest career, but I bonused on almost half my fights. So I had financially, a pretty good career in comparison to a lot of guys. That being said, I'm retired from fighting, but I'm not retired. I'm still struggling to make ends meet. I got with some good finance guys, so I'm doing okay, but a lot of these guys aren't. And when you see the UFC they've built themselves into this, powerhouse, huge multi-billion-dollar corporation, and the guys who help, they got to where they are on the backs of a lot of people, like me and Spencer and all sorts of these guys, and they're really leaving them twisting in the wind when times are good for them and times are bad for the other guys. It's just I don't want to get on too much of a rant, and I still I still don't want the UFC to fold. I don't want them to, I'm not wishing ill on them. I want to see the business grow, but I just want to see them bring some of the little guys up with them.
And building on that, we look at other leagues, like professional organizations. I know the UFC has grown tremendously from the time that you joined them. Now they're anywhere close to $10 billion of a industry. So it's huge.
Yeah.
And whenever you compare them to, I know, like something like baseball, for example. Of course, baseball is bigger. They've been around for a lot longer, but they also have a very big roster of players. And whenever for them, as soon as you hit 45 days games played in the MLB level, so the major leagues, you get at least a guaranteed minimum little bit of a pension after. Then if you hit 10 years, you get 65 grand. Wouldn't you think that eventually I know that there's no unions in the UFC right now, and there's nothing talks right immediate, but wouldn't you think that eventually the UFC would have to go back and do something for the fighters like yourself who went 20 fights deep for their career to try to help them out?
I think a pension for the fighters is definitely the answer. Something along those lines. Once you put your certain amount of time in, then you don't have to be taken care of. Like, you don't need to be going around on yachts, but basic living expenses should be a minimum. A lot of us give up the prime years of our lives to do this sport, and it's something we love, and especially in my day when it was really, you were doing it for the love of the sport. There wasn't a lot of money, but I just hoped, maybe it was just wishful thinking that, when I first got into the UFC, they had, if you watch that, little documentary thing that they did at the 20th anniversary when they were going bankrupt when they did, when they originally bought the UFC, they weren't sure if it was going to work.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it did. So don't just keep like, you don't need a garage full of Lamborghinis anymore. Like there's a certain amount or a certain point where it's like, come on guys, like you have enough money, start sharing the wealth a little bit. Like you're talking about MLB and all these major pro sports are giving 50% of their revenue to the athletes.
Yeah.
The UFC is like what, 13% or something like that last I heard. And most of that's going to their marquee guys. Like there needs to be there needs to be more money going into the fighters' pockets, because in reality the sport doesn't exist without them.
Yeah, well, I mean, even I believe with Conor, everyone talks about his 100 mil. I'm pretty sure Dana got 40% of that, if I'm not mistaken.
That was for the Mayweather fight. That wasn't for a UFC fight.
Yeah, but the fact that he still is able to pocket 40% just from being involved in it versus a fighter who's still great, 60 million. But Floyd made how much versus Conor? You know,
I mean that you can only they're gangsters, man. They're like you're paying. They don't do nothing happens without them getting a piece.
No, definitely. And I know you mentioned in that too, and I've heard you mention a few times that you would not come back for the amount of money you made in your last fight. And like, you seem very anti-UFC, not in terms of like the organization, but in terms of fighting again. How much would it actually take?
Let me just make this clear. I'm not anti-UFC. I just think, and I don't think that this needs to be all of a sudden 50% of the revenue goes to the athletes.
Right.
I just think there needs to be things in place. We're learning more about CTE and brain injuries every day, and nothing's really changed in terms of protocols and whatnot for the UFC and what they're doing for athletes that suffer those kind of damages. I signed a contract that said I'm risking injury, I'm risking death, I'm risking all these things. But at this point, at the point in time when I did that, I wasn't aware of. I mean, nobody was aware of CT and permanent brain injuries like this, and more and more light keeps getting shed on these subjects every day, but nothing's really changing on the UFC's end. I love the UFC. I'm proud of I still watch every event pretty much. I'm proud to have been a part of it. I love the UFC. I respect Dana White. I just think he just needs to think about the fighters a little bit more.
No, absolutely. I just meant like in terms of like you would never fight for the UFC again, like per your other interviews, you're just not interested in a fight in terms of the amount of money. So like realistically, to get you interested, what would they have to offer you for Sam Stout to come back?
I'd say $250,000. I'd risk it. And I think after 20 fights in the UFC, I should have been making close to that in the, anyways.
Yeah.
I just think the pay needs, if you don't win your fight, you move on to the next fight, there's no pay increase. So for a guy like me who was, I fought 20 times, my record isn't the best. So my pay was, I was making 34 and 34 after 10 years there. You look at a rookie in the NHL, what's their minimum contract is like 750,000. Yeah. So a kid who's 18, 19, 20 years old playing his first year in the NHL is going to make more money than I made in my entire career if you don't count the bonuses. I made just shy of $1 million. That's in 10 years of, I think all the blood, sweat, and tears. That's an average of $100,000 a year. That's, there's a lot of things I could have done that were a lot safer for me, where I could have been making $100,000 a year, and I could still be making $100,000 a year or more if I didn't do this UFC thing. So I don't know. I sound like I'm whining a little bit, but no. I just think that there's some kind of changes have to be made. I think more money for the fighters, more post-career care, and maybe a pension like you talked about. And at the very least, take care of their medical expenses for guys like Spencer who are, who are living in the US. I mean, for me, my medication's a pretty small amount of money. And I don't have serious problems. And, I can't even really prove that they are from fighting. I just suspect they are. But a guy like Spencer he's living in the Smoky Mountains now. So he's living in the US. He's, he's paying for medication out of pocket. I don't think that's right. I don't think, he didn't, we signed these contracts saying that we're kind of washed. We know the risks, but we didn't know the risks. We didn't know that Spencer didn't know he was going to be, he was going to be diagnosed with dementia at 44 years old. Like that's crazy. And to have them turn their backs on him, to me, is disgusting.
No, I definitely understand. I think everyone agrees with that viewpoint, honestly. And with that being said, too, a lot of fighters we've seen kind of post UFC, because they can't get those larger contracts, they've moved on to organizations like BKFC, where they are getting those large sums and they're actually getting those headlines. Would you ever consider something like that?
I mean, and you keep asking me about comebacks. Like, really, I'm not playing. I have a daughter. I have a little boy a son on the way. I'm, my health is going to have to come first. I mean, but me saying that is easy for me to say because some of my very good friends are with a group called Navigator Financial, and they, luckily before it was too late, I did things like I bought a house. I invested a lot of my money into my RSPs and kind of thought ahead, but a lot of these guys don't. And my career lasted a long time. The first 5 years I spent it as fast as I made it. I was just out at the bars after the fight, buying everyone in my, in a 10 meter radius shots and just living like a rock star. A lot of guys' careers are only those 5 years. And when you've never had money before, you don't know that you need to invest. You need to let that grow. So luckily I figured it out before it was too late, and I've got a little nest egg, but I'm not rich by any means. I'm, but for me, I don't think I would come back. For guys who are in more desperate situations than me, they're going to have to risk their health in order to make any kind of decent payday or go work, I'll tell you, it's not a lucrative job running a gym or training people for a living. If you want to be a high level coach, and sure, you're going to make money, but it takes years and years to build yourself to that level, to build a team of guys, like what Shawn Tompkins, the man up here, did for me and did for our team, or any of these coaches. They didn't get there overnight. They paid their dues just like I just think they need to, there's a lot of things that need to happen, really.
Yeah, and with you mentioning on the last note about kind of, I guess, you not being as financially intelligent during your early days, could you maybe tell us, like, just two-part here kind of quickly, what do you think, like, is there one just outright purchase that you downright regret? And two, what is your craziest post-fight party story that you won't get in trouble for telling us?
I think my biggest expenses, I like to have fun, right? I like to travel. I like to, I was the king of Richmond Street in London, Ontario for a while. I had a bunch of, I was spent so much time, celebrating after the fights that a lot of times I became friends with a lot of people in the service industry, bartenders and servers and stuff. And they all used to fight over who was going to get to my bill. That's what one told me that, because I tipped a lot, I spent a lot, so I had nothing to show for any of those things except for some good memories. The only problem is I can't remember most of them. But I remember, I think the the big wake up call for me actually was after one fight. I think it was after I fought Jeremy Stevens, and we hit a bonus and we had fight of the night. And, you know, I walked away with somewhere in the $100,000 kind of ballpark. And I came home, and there's a bar in London called Barney's, where it was like my summer spot, right? As soon as the weather was nice, outdoor patio, everyone was there. You can't, like, I knew everyone in the place. And I went there, and I spent the first month after that Stevens fight hanging out there pretty much every day. And I got to the end of the month, and I just kind of, out of curiosity, looked at my bank statement, and I had spent $10,000 there.
Oh.
And I was like, oh my God, man. I just like remember my jaw being on the floor, and I, you know, started doing some quick math in my head and realized that this is not a sustainable lifestyle for me. So that was when I got with my my guys at Navigator Financial, and you know, I really talked to the young up and coming fighters and say, like, listen, man, you could get lucky like me and hit bonuses for 10 years, but be prepared, you know, plan for the best, but or expect the best, but plan for the worst. And you know, I've helped a lot of the the newer guys and introduce them to the guys that helped me out with my finances. But so, and the UFC did do a little, the fighter summits back in the day, and they kind of advised us to, you know, they got all the fighters together for a weekend. They flew us all out to Vegas. It was really, you know, it was a lot of fun. And they did this seminar for us where they talked to us about, you know, about social media and marketing ourselves, and saving money was one of them, but it was really a half-assed attempt. And, you know, it was literally, I remember them saying, one thing you can do to save money is start a savings account. And I was like, wow, like, this is really, I think, you know, giving guys the option to pay towards it, put a little bit away towards a pension, and, you know, maybe invest some of that money for them, and help them with that, and educate them a little bit more on you know, that's one way one thing they could do that's a minor expense out of their pocket. Hang on one second, I got my dog.
Take your time.
Yeah, so I just think like some kind of pension plan, like you had mentioned, where maybe fighters, you could even give fighters the option to pay some, you know, take a percentage out of their fight purses. I mean, really, they should add some more, right? Because a lot of these guys are living paycheck to paycheck, so they might say no to it, but or not really give them an option and just say,
yeah,
your money's going into it. Invest for them, send them, you know, maybe send them, you know, updates on how their money's doing. So, because I mean, that was for me was a big eye opener. It's like, oh, okay, I invested $100,000 into this, and then I remember getting a statement one year and saying, all right, now I'm at 118. I was like, I just made 18 grand in a year for you know, on money that would have just been sitting in my account or been spent at Barney's.
I was about to say at Barney's.
Yeah. So that was a big one for me. And then once you start to see your money grow, then it's like, you know, you get a little more invested in it, for lack of a better word. You get a little more, you know, you take more interest in it. You start to do your research a little bit more. And then guys come, like for me, I came out of my career and you know, the biggest regret is just not getting educated on basic finance stuff a little bit earlier, because we have such a short window. It's, you know, and it bothers me that Dana said recently that the fighting in the UFC isn't a career, it's an opportunity. And that to me was a real kick in the nuts to hear him say that. It's just like, you know, that I thought was kind of a low thing to say. And it's sad to hear the promoter of this organization talk like that.
Right. Because you don't work towards an opportunity to help you work towards a career. So
yeah.
So kind of touching on that point, the UFC obviously, of course, has changed considerably from the point that you joined it. You were back in it right in its heyday, right at the beginning. And do you see them? Have you seen any big improvements on their end? Like, what's one thing that you see with your fighters today compared to what you had?
Let's trashing the UFC time is over. All right, let's get back. Let's get on
first half versus second half.
Let's look at the silver linings here.
Yeah.
Yes, there is. I mean that experience on Fight Island was like, I was like, damn, I wish it was like this back in my day. Like they had, they have the UFC Performance Center now, right? And they're flying staff out to the locations of the events. They've got meals. They're prepping meals for guys. They're when I was doing it, some of the ways I saw people cutting weight was ridiculous. You got people who have no idea about the dietary, the proper way to do it in terms of what you're eating, what your exercising routines. Like guys, I'd see guys in the hotel with plastics on a week before, like 5 days before weigh-ins, and I'd see all this crazy stuff going on, and people with these crazy diets. I remember seeing Kaplan. I don't know if you remember him from the Ultimate Fighter, the lightweight. He decided he was going to eat. He was a calorie counter, and he ate he would eat cured meats and like candy and these it was just crazy. So now they're really helping guys with the nutrition side of things. That's a big plus. The fighters are more pampered. They're better. There's less for them to worry about on fight week, which I think is a really good thing in terms of getting the best performances out of them. So that's probably the biggest change I've seen. That's really cool.
And do you think like the Reebok sponsorship was big for that? Because we know, again, where some people, they've been down on it, but like you said, there's a big worry off fighters and during fight week, probably in terms of maybe sponsors falling out last minute.
Well, that should be on your managers anyways.
Right.
So that's having a good management team. And I don't know that I love, for me, the Reebok deal ended up working out well because the UFC was putting out so much content at that, at the Reebok time with, the new, I think it was, who did they sign with first? Fox?
It was Fox.
Before it was ESPN, it was Fox. And they were putting out all these cards, and they didn't give the casual fans, they kind of just bombarded them with content. And the casual fans, it was overwhelming to them. It became too hard to follow, and you lost some casual fans based on that. I think the hardcore fans weren't enough to be, the following of the hardcore fans that were really watching every event wasn't enough for companies to validate paying these crazy amounts of money for, a Wednesday night free live TV event. So a lot of people, myself included, were seeing a major decline in sponsorships. For me, when Reebok came out, a lot of people were complaining because I think if you were a first time fighter, you're only making $3,000.
Yeah.
And then it took 3 fights, and they bump you up to 5 or 6 or whatever it was. So you had a guy like Luke Rockhold was the example I always use, who was making $150,000 a fight on sponsorships, but because he was new to the UFC, he was only making $5,000, and he just said, keep it. That's a slap in the face. For me, when they came in, it was my only fight with Reebok was on my last fight. So I was already making $15,000, which was more than I made in sponsors for my last fight. If I would have stayed one more, I would have been bumped up to $20,000. So, but that was because I already put in that time.
Yeah.
So, and the one thing, and for my manager, Robert Rivetta, who's Dustin Poirier's manager, agent, whatever you want to call him, he, basically said, dude, I'm not going to bother taking, they basically canceled managers, right? They made it so their job is very minimal, and it put all the control into the UFC's hands again, which was, kind of a power move on their part, and another, gangster move on the UFC's part, because, it took away the opportunity for certain fighters to make more. I mean, some fighters, myself included, made more off Reebok, but there's a lot of it took away a bit of freedom to potentially hustle and have your manager make you a boatload of money. And like, there were some guys who were making more money on sponsorships than the fights.
Right. And just because we've been speaking about the UFC, I would love to actually talk about your fight career itself a bit. So before even MMA, what was your first fight ever? Like, was it on the playground? What was Sam Stout's first fight?
I was a scrappy kid. My first fight was on the playground. First grade, a kid named Ben Potter.
Remembers the name.
Punched each other out, and we ended up becoming really good friends after. And I ended up sleeping over at his house all the time. We were good friends. But I was like, I wasn't, he had 4 older brothers, and he was picking on me a little bit in school. I asked my dad what to do. And my dad said, next time he hurts you or hits you, you hit him right back. So that was the start of my fight career. I was always kind of the friend in the group that was like, okay, if somebody's messing with one of my friends, I'm going to be the one who steps in and does the fighting. And then, but my first sanctioned fight or semi-sanctioned fight, I guess, was in a little smoker. I met Shawn Tompkins when I was 16. Started training with him pretty much immediately after I met him, and then I had my first kickboxing fight 4 months later. So that I started off as a kickboxer, which was pretty evident from my style. And really, even when I first started fighting MMA, I was pretty much a kickboxer fighting MMA fights. It was still in that era where it wasn't uncommon to see a striker versus a grappler. And that was pretty much how my career kind of started. And it really stayed till the end, because it was so ingrained in my kind of fight game plan to keep the fight standing and force guys to stand with me, that I never really started implementing grappling, which I think really shortened my career a little bit. And I think if I could go back and do it again, I would have focused more on not just training jiu-jitsu, but implementing it in my fight game plans a lot more.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned Shawn a couple of times in this interview. Obviously, rest in peace to him. What was it like having your brother-in-law as your head coach? Like, what's that relationship like?
Well, he was, it was a very close relationship. He was, he was basically my big brother before it was, he was actually married to my sister. He really became a mentor for me. I idolized the guy. He was, he was 10 years older than me. Let me hang out with him after, we'd have a few beers together after fights. We'd, talk about, things, life. He was a lot more than just a coach to me. He was, regardless of whether or not he was married to my sister, he was more of a brother to me.
And I'm sure that went a long way in your love for the game. The love
it
for the
did.
sport.
100%. There were some times I thought about quitting, and he was the one who talked me off the ledge and got me to keep going. He's, and he was, and like I said, I idolized the guy so much that he was a big motivator for me, to go out there. And it's like, I mean, I don't know about most guys. I think I've heard this from guys other than myself, but there's a moment in the back room when you're warming up where like every single fight I had, I was sitting, you put your head in your hands and you're like, why the fuck do I do this? Like, there's a million other ways I could have made a living. It's scary. There's so much pressure on you. There's so much, you have to work past in order to go out there and perform. And, for me, pleasing Shawn and kind of earning his respect and his approval was a big reason for me to do that. So, and I think that's a big part of why you saw a slide in my career, in my performances after he was gone. I just didn't have that, I lost a big motivator for me, and it was just, keep making him happy and making, and contributing to the Team Tompkins success.
Yeah, and could you maybe, if it's not too difficult, maybe speak to like the conflicting emotions of that summer? Because you have the highest of highs with the Eve Edwards knockout, and then obviously the passing of Shawn. Like, how do you even come back and want to fight again, like you said?
Well, it's back to kind of what we were saying. I just didn't really have another choice. And, I did want to carry on his legacy, and I still do. And that's, I'm doing that more on the coaching side of things, and the gym, and kind of keeping that Team Tompkins spirit alive. But that was the hardest time of my life for sure. And really, I think my career would have ended a lot differently had he didn't pass away. So yeah, that was a big hit for me, and it was a very big struggle. I mean, I tried out some different coaches, but guys that I knew and respected, and I knew that Shawn respected also. I went with Mark Delagrati for one fight, and him and I got along great. We were friends for years before this, and I knew I felt I went with him first because I thought this is a guy Shawn would have approved of me working with. But it's just that, the atmosphere of going out to Boston and staying with him, it was just, I was homesick. Something didn't feel right. I probably should have given him a few more chances, because Shawn always said that, anytime you see a guy switch camps, there's usually like a 3-fight adjustment period. Maybe I didn't wait that out long enough with Mark. Then I went with Reno Belcastro, who was a friend of ours from Windsor, who is a great coach, but a more of a striking coach, same as Shawn. And I can't blame him. He put me through. We had some great camps. We clicked together well on a lot of the same ways Shawn and I did. I respect him so much. He respected me and my kind of way of doing things, and let me kind of say, well, this is how I've always done it. And he kind of catered to my needs really well, but I just, for whatever reason, I think I didn't come out and perform. So I don't know, man. It was a sad end of my career for me, and it left me with some kind of feelings of kind of coulda, woulda, shoulda, but it is what it is. That's life.
No, I think a lot of people don't give you credit for even just going through those fights, because going into your corner every time, and like you said, waiting, I guess, for your brother to be there, and then he's not. Like, I think that alone just takes a huge, just probably every time you went back to the corner, just a toll on you.
100%, man. It was just never the same after Shawn passed, and it wasn't. Before Shawn passed, it was just like, this is what we do. Like, there was no questions, there was no doubts, and there just really was a lot of them after Shawn passed. So, yeah, it is what it is. Like I say, my fight career, and taking a slide is the least of. It should really be the least of the worries that I have overall when I think of losing Shawn. I worry more, like the bigger hit was losing, him as a person and what he was to me. So, I just try and care. I quote the guy, he's had all these stupid sayings, and I quote him all the time. I try and train the fighters that I'm like the guys in the up and comers in the gym. I try and keep a lot of the lessons and the legacy that Shawn gave to us. I try and pass along. So, that's my way of honoring his memory.
No, I think that's awesome, man.
It must feel great to be able to kind of circle it back and now be in the corner in the UFC and be able to kind of pass along this mentorship to the next generation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Shawn helped Malcolm get there, but it was a really cool feeling to have him in there and be in his corner for his first UFC fight. And I hope to carry on and bring more and more guys. It's the last couple of years has been really hard to push our fight team because we opened this new gym and we kind of invested everything we have into the new Adrenaline. We bought the building. We kind of put all our eggs in that basket. So we've had to really focus on getting the business up and running so that it can sustain the fighters. Hopefully when this pandemic ends, we can start to bounce back. We can bounce back quickly. And once the gym is kind of self-sustaining and it's making enough money and running itself a little more smoothly, and we're not so stressed about keeping all our bills paid, then I can really focus more on, and invest more of my time into the fighters and get more and more guys into the UFC, and what I'll be able to do that, Shawn was learning for the first time is help them with some of the things that we've talked about, the money aspects, the watching out for the signs of, trauma, keep them safer, do my part to keep them safer, and then hope the UFC kind of follows suit eventually with helping take care of these kids.
Yeah, and I think having a mind like you around the UFC so often and implementing, just kind of letting me know of these ideas, I think it's more likely that it will happen, honestly.
Yeah, I'd hope so.
And going back to your UFC career too, looking back at your record, I noticed your first fight when they used to do the names on the card, it was UFC versus Canada. Did that even matter at the time? Like, did that add pressure to it, or were you guys just like, fuck, this is just a stupid name, who cares?
No, you know what, it was very cool. I think that's the last time they tried to do any gimmicky things like that. But what made that cool, it was Mark was there for his first fight in the UFC, Mark Hominick against Eve Edwards, myself, and Rob McDonald, who had just competed on The Ultimate Fighter, I think season 2 or 3. And it made it a very cool experience, because not only were we on there, those two training partners of mine, but George St-Pierre was on the card. David Loiseau was on the card. Who else? Jonathan
Goulet, I believe.
Jonathan Goulet wasn't on it. Steve Vigneault was on it. Like, so these were all the guys that we had competed against kind of in TKO. And it was basically the whole TKO starting lineup was heading up a UFC card. So the vibe in the back room was really cool. I remember being back in the back room with George St-Pierre, watching him warm up, and him and I were friends. Had known each other. He had actually cornered against me a few times against some of the French fighters. So it was a very cool atmosphere. Did it play a factor in the outcomes of the fights? Not really. But it made for a very cool experience. That UFC 58, that weekend was, we were fighting in MGM in Las Vegas. We were, Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas. We had, we had a big crew. There was a bunch of people from back home that came. There's a lot of the TKO fans and people came to support too. So it was, it was a very cool, like almost magical experience. And then me and Mark coming out, both winning as underdogs, and it was really, a very memorable debut in the UFC.
Awesome.
And speaking about that fight is considered one of the greatest UFC fights in history, and that was your debut. Did you feel that you set the bar a bit too high for yourself to repeat that performance?
You know what? If I was bonus hunting all the time. Like, there was nothing worse to me than hearing the crowd boo. It was like nails on a chalkboard to me. It frustrated me so much, and sometimes it caused me to take unnecessary risks. It's just the way I was built. It's just that's why that was one of the things I loved about fighting is I was doing it for the fans. The bonuses were one thing, but that fight with Spencer, there was no bonuses. I think Dana sent us a $500 bonus for that one.
That's it? No way.
On top of my $4,000, I got a personalized letter from Dana and $500. And
they put you on the UFC top 100 fights ever too, at like 16 or something.
Yeah. We were pretty high up there. I think we were number 10 and number 16 for Spencer Fisher, Sam Stout 1, and then number 2 a year later. So yeah, we made that list twice. So yeah, for $4,500 I made that.
Mind blowing, but at the time you're probably just excited to be able to put on that show.
I was just happy to be there, man. I was just happy to be there.
And speaking of that too, your second fight, like the bar just kept getting higher. You fight Kenny Florian in your second fight. How good is Kenny?
I know, man. He was he really caught me off guard with that one. I hadn't at that point. I don't think I had lost a fight in 4 years. My confidence was high. I had George St-Pierre in my corner. I spent the last 2 weeks of my camp training with him. Which in hindsight may not have been the best call. I probably should have stuck with what got me there, the formula that got me there. But that being said, it was it was a learning experience for me. Kenny came out, hit me with a big overhand, took me down, imposed his grappling on me, and I was kind of out of it from the shot. So he just kind of caught me off guard. But that was a tough fight. It was a tough loss for me, but I was still young enough. I was 21 I just turned 22 for that fight. So it was a learning experience. I chalk it up to that.
It's funny though, because you say kind of like how I've heard you say in other interviews how you felt like maybe you were a bit cocky because of fighting. Do you think if you got a title shot like Kenny did against Sean Shirk after that win at 22, that would have made you would that have changed you even more?
I don't think me at that time had the wrestling takedown defense to take on Sean Shirk. So I don't know, man. Everything happens for a reason. I think that loss when I got it, kind of was a wake-up call for me. I don't think I was ready for a title shot at 22 against Sean Shirk. So whatever, it happened the way it happened for a reason. Yeah, man, I try not to be too bitter. I know I kind of came off at the start of this interview talking about, complaining about a lot of things, but I'm thankful for my career as a whole. I'm thankful that, I was able to, experience what I experienced and survive to tell about it and not really have too much, not to have too many lasting effects. I've lived a very fun life that I'm very proud of. So
what would you say your favorite fight story is then? If your craziest favorite, whatever you want to chalk it up to.
Favorite fight story or favorite fight?
I think favorite fight, I feel like I believe you had said Joe Lozon. I've heard you say that a few times. So I want something unique. I want your favorite fight story.
That's a tough one. I haven't really let's see here.
Just think of the weekends or something of this was the one time that I just love fighting because this weekend.
You know what? Probably Spencer Fisher too. I mean, I lost the fight, but if you watch that one, I don't know if you can hear it in the commentary, but I went out there and I kind of threw caution in the wind and lost that fight because I was just, but I was having fun, man. I remember coming back to the corner and Shawn coming back and asking me how do you feel? And I just remember responding I'm having a great time. It was, I like those knockdown drag out fights. For whatever reason, those punches didn't seem to hurt at the time. I was just it was, I think I might've realized at the time what I was taking part in. I realized that this is a crazy fight and I'm smack dab in the middle of it. So, for me, that was a cool feeling. That's, one of those memories that I'll hold on to and kind of cherish.
Absolutely.
And whenever you went and said that you weren't ready probably at 22 to fight someone like Sean Shirk, do you see that happening with even current fighters right now where they might not be ready to face somebody to another that are in a different skill level, but the opportunity's there, so they just jump on it and take it?
Yeah. I think the UFC rushes some guys because they're, great self-marketers and great self-promoters hoping for the next Conor McGregor, right?
Yeah.
Like you see, I think they kind of did that with Sean O'Malley a little bit. Maybe, that's arguable. It's debatable, but yeah.
They definitely did.
Yeah. I think the COVID, as much as I feel terrible for him, and I was excited as anyone to see what he was capable of, Cam's at. I think, you're throwing him to the wolves pretty quick.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, and you know, one loss, if he takes a loss to Leon Edwards or whoever they ended up matching him up against, I think he can still bounce back from it. But yeah, they're you know, they sometimes I feel like they're kind of, guys are commodities to them, and they're not always looking out for your best interest. But that's, you know, one of the few roles a manager still has, and you know. But the hard thing about managers is they're not always the most trustworthy, you know, selfless people. They're usually, a lot of times they're in it to make money too. So, you know, I had Robert Rivetta, who I don't think he's really he's not really managing guys anymore except for Dustin, because he's been with him for so long. And, you know, I guess Dustin doesn't give him as many headaches as some of the other fighters he had. But, you know, I had a manager that I trusted, that I knew was looking at would put my health before he would put a paycheck. And, you know, if guys don't have that, it can be a dangerous sport to be in.
No, absolutely. And I just have two more questions here on that note. So the first one, we mentioned guys maybe not being ready. Do you think Gilbert Burns is ready for Kamaru Usman tonight?
I think that Burns is my dark horse. I think his pace is great, because Kamaru in his wins, the guy's impressive. I won't take anything away from him. I don't like that his style is to wear you out and then go for the win in the late rounds, and like wear you out in such a boring way. Like what he did to Masvidal, who's one of my favorite guys to watch. You know, go out there, the guy takes a fight on short notice, and you're going to pin him on the cage, wear him down, and then, you know, not go for a finish. I don't think you can be a great champion if you're that type of fighter. That being said, I think Gilbert Burns is that type of fighter. I think he's going to press you. He's going to pressure you. He's going to make it fast paced. He's going to be threatening you in different areas and not just stick to the same boring game plan. I think that they've been training partners, and I think Burns looks confident in this one. So I think that tells me he knows something. And Usman changed camps. And like I was saying earlier, Shawn always used to say, there's usually a 3-fight adjustment period when you go onto a new camp. So if you want my dark horse pick for tonight's fights, it's Burns. I've already put some money down.
Nice. I feel like a lot of people agree with that too. He definitely is.
And the odds,
get a lot of love.
for those odds, I think they're not showing the true, you know, favorite. And I mean, if they were even odd, like, part of why it's a good bet is because he's such a big underdog. He's
right.
like a -240.
It's huge.
Yeah. So I think if all the bettors watching out there, that's the bet I've already gone with.
We'll be cutting this out just for that. Don't worry.
And kind of building on that, I know that you've mentioned that you, of course, knew Dustin Poirier very well. You know him very well. And do you think it's right what they're doing with the title situation in that division? There's a lot of guys that kind of want to get that title fight in, and the fact that they're kind of pushing for the McGregor fight instead.
I think the most interesting thing they could have done was a lightweight Grand Prix kind of thing over 3 cards or over 6 months or whatever you want to do. That would have been. I said it in social media, posted it a few times on other people's social media. That's what I think they should have done. I jokingly said they should do an 8-man lightweight tournament one night. That'd be real badass.
That would.
Yeah, I think, you know, Dana takes care of Conor, so if Conor wants it, he gets it. You know, Dustin, it's another big money fight for him. Do I think it's the best thing for the division? No. I think, you know, I think it helps Dustin build his dream home that he's working on, which looks like it's going to be massive. So, you know, good for him. I like seeing the fighters make money, but in terms of as a fan, I would like to see an 8-man tournament style, or you know, have Dustin fight. I think he should fight Charles Oliveira. I think, you know, maybe have Mike Chandler, have him fight one more opponent, be the first one for or next one in line for a title shot after. I think he needs one more win though. I think who else is, I think him and Gaethje would be a great fight, and then have the winner fight for that. Something along those lines.
No, I agree. My hope was that they would do those four. Conor
There's
said he
too many interesting matchups right now to just have redo the fight that we just watched.
No, exactly. Then like Chandler's ready to. These guys are ready. Like there's going to be another fight before summer.
And I know that you've mentioned yourself as kind of one of the trailblazers for Canadians in the UFC, but of course there's people like GSP there before you got there, and right now there's been rumors in the last couple of months of a potential GSP return if there's a Khabib fight. Do you believe that GSP could come back, and if he does, that he can still dominate like he used to?
I don't think that. I think if he's going to come back, that's the only fight that makes sense. That's one where he's probably. I mean, I've heard Khabib gets pretty big, but George, I think, is naturally, he's going to have a bigger frame. I think he's going to have a little bit of size on Khabib. He matches up well against a solid wrestler, as we know. I I don't think he's going to come back for an extended period of time. It would be like when he came back to fight Bisping.
Yeah.
If it's a fight that interests him and he came back for one fight, I think that would be one of the biggest fights ever, right? You got two guys that you can make a strong argument as the GOATs, right? In my opinion, it's George, for the record. But George, and then there's always John Jones. I know there's a lot of John Jones haters out there, but I love John Jones. I think he's in my opinion, he's never lost. He's got a little, there's if it wasn't for, the drug problems and suspensions, he'd be hands down the GOAT in my book. You got to put a little asterisk beside his name because he's been caught with performance enhancers. But I still think it's between those three, and George is because George has stayed clean the whole time, because he's got more wins in, title defenses, more wins, more time spent on top than Khabib does. I think George is the GOAT. And
before we ask the last question, because we mentioned George, you've trained with him. Is there like one specific time training with him where you're like, man, like what the fuck is this guy? Like, he's just insane.
No, the whole week, 2 weeks I spent with him in Vegas before the Florian fight. That's the only time we've really spent any significant time training together. And the whole time it was like that. The guy was unbelievable. It still is unbelievable. But when I remember I was in full fight camp, I'm 7 weeks into my camp when I get there. So I'm in pretty much as good a shape as you can be in. And we went and did a track workout where he was having me do a lot of the things that he does, right? We went out to a track in Vegas and he just blew me away. And this is him, not in camp, not training for anything, just like going out for drinks the night before. And then he just dusted me. When we sparred, we did I felt like I did okay with him standing. As soon as he wanted to take me down, I was on the ground. Like there was no stopping his takedowns. Like the guy was just such a freak, and still is just such a freak athlete.
We've spoken to 3 people and asked them about that, and they all just say his wrestling is just.
Like I've talked to some of the guys from the Montreal Wrestling Club, and apparently he gets his ass handed to him by some of the wrestlers there. But when you add striking and MMA, like it's a different thing. Like wrestling for MMA and wrestling for wrestling are 2 different things. And when you're talking wrestling for MMA, he's on, a different level than just about anybody. Him maybe, or the only other people I would put into that category is or the only other person I guess is Khabib.
Absolutely. And the last question I had here, when we were doing some research just to see what we can file for you, we actually came across an article, I believe was last year. Your daughter decided to donate all her piggy bank funds to an Australian relief fund, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
How did that come about? And tell us about it.
It was during the, I guess was it before or during it was before the pandemic, but it was, if everyone remembers my wife there.
I heard it was before.
She's there to correct me as always. The Australian forest fires, wildfires, and my wife was watching videos of it, and people rescuing koalas and stuff like that. And my daughter Logan, who's just an amazing kid, said that she wanted to go to Australia and help the koalas. And Jesse said, well, we can't go to Australia, but if you wanted to, you could donate some of your money out of your piggy bank. So they counted it up, and she had, I kind of let her, if she finds change around the house, I let her throw it in her piggy bank. So she had like $62, I think. So we asked her how much she wanted to donate, if she wanted to and she said all of it without hesitating. And Jesse, my wife, posted that on Instagram, and all these people were like, Jesse and I said we'd each match the $62. So it was, $186 between the three of us. And we posted that on Instagram, and all these people were like, well, I'll match it too. And so everyone was donating in these $62 increments, and she ended up raising $6,000.
Oh, no way. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then later that year, she had this really beautiful long hair. As you can see, the long hair, the gray hair runs in the family. So she had never had a haircut. And we kind of, I kind of put it in her head to encourage her to get a haircut. I said, well, if you wanted to, you could donate your hair, and they'll make a wig out of it for a kid who has cancer and doesn't have any hair. So she got all excited about it, and we decided to get a little money drive going for that, and she raised another $4,000 for this organization that called Baby's Breath, that helped me and my wife through our kind of trying time after losing our baby girl Sydney last year. So yeah, she's my daughter Logan's, she's 6 years old, and she's already raised $10,000 for charity altogether, and donated 12 inches of hair for Angel Hair for Kids or something like that, an organization that makes wigs for kids with cancer. So I'm very proud every day of my daughter.
Oh my, no, man, that's just amazing. It makes people think, especially like me, like what could you do? Like, you actually have you have a social following, you have whatever it is, and this little girl could raise $10,000 before she's 6. That's amazing.
Yeah. I'm very proud of her. It's something, I think it's something that, if you have the ability to do it, you should do it. Right. And it's something that, you have a kid, and you start to think about how you want to raise them, who you want them to grow up to be. And if you start getting them on those things early, I think I'm hoping that's something she carries on with the rest of her life. And she's always looking to help people that are less fortunate than her. And if we all raise our kids like that, then hopefully the world isn't as screwed up for their kids' generation as we've left it for them.
No, absolutely. I mean, no one's going to argue with that.
It's a fantastic point, and it's very impressive to see. It's something that she can, even if she doesn't continue more efforts, she can help herself when it comes to future job prospects, just her whole life. And she can go back on and be like, I did this at this age. Nothing is impossible. Yeah.
It's nice to kind of instill those things that are going to benefit her and also benefit other people, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Sam, we appreciate your time. We've taken a good hour out of it. When the gyms reopen, I'll drive down to London. I will let you beat me up for 10, 15 minutes to make up for it. So I'll message you when the gyms reopen, or you let me know. I definitely hope.
You think you can last 10, 15 minutes?
I just didn't want to say an hour.
Okay.
I haven't even started with Joe yet, so no, we won't go too far.
Right. But yeah, I'd love to have you guys at the gym, or Well, I guess you're all the way in Ottawa, so that's a tough trip. But yeah, anytime. Doors always open.
Love
awesome,
it.
man. I appreciate it. Can't wait. Again, thank you for coming on, Sam. Wish you guys all the well, yourself, your family, new baby on the way, puppy, everything. Great times. Thank you, Sam.
Life is good. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Have a good one, man.